I was walking down a long and winding road in a dense fog, the echoes of my footsteps my only companion. Strangely, I can't recall how I got here. The last thing I remembered doing was reading another newly released FAQ document for one of my many armies of miniatures on my computer. Now that I think about it, I don't remember much of the details on that document either, only the vague residual feeling of annoyance from another wave of adjustments. These changes used to be exciting, but eventually, like most things in life, they ceased to be so. The world seemed to get grimmer as one aged. The thrill of gaming and the fickle glories it entailed faded to dust over the years. These thoughts were running through my mind as I continued to walk forward in a semi-consciousness state, and slowly a realization came to me. Wait. Am I lucid dreaming? Being an indoors-type person all my life, the current scenario of walking down a long winding road in a dense fog with no destination in mind just doesn't make any sense. What is going on here? I looked back, only to be greeted by the same road that disappeared into a fog that shrouded everything. I shrugged and continued forward. Something was compelling me to walk forward, and I got a feeling that answers would be found at the end of the road. This was beginning to look like a setup for a horror movie, but I felt at peace. The lone walk continued for a while until something was visible in the distance. There at the edge of the fog was the silhouette of a person. As I got closer, that person came into view. Okay, I thought to myself, I must be lucid dreaming. Appearing out from the dense fog was the prettiest girl I had seen in my life. As someone who had spent a large chunk of my time surfing the internet and as a result, got bombarded with an endless stream of advertisements and media featuring pretty ladies, it was a really tall order to top that list. She was a girl about 165 centimeters in height, and underneath a head of straight flowing platinum hair was a face of idealized perfection, and a simple yet elegant-looking white robe completed her angelic look. She had this paradoxical quality about her that made guessing her age an impossible task, looking youthful yet ancient at the same time. "Hello," I said, not sure what to expect from this encounter. She stood perfectly still, observing me with her large, soulful silver eyes and a dead neutral expression. After a period of awkward silence, she performed a hand gesture I recognized but least expected to see in these most unusual of circumstances. It was the hand sign of Aquila, a universal greeting gesture of humans in the grimdark universe of which as a hobby I had invested too much time and resources into. I really have to cut back my spending on that front, I thought to myself. Evidently, even my rare occasion of a lucid dream had elements of that universe seeping in. Flustered, I responded in the only way that made sense to me by making an Aquila sign myself. There I was, responding to a very pretty girl by making a geeky hand gesture on a road surrounded by dense fog. It was very surreal. We stayed like that for a while, maintaining the Aquila hand gesture while looking at each other. Finally, she seemed to have made a decision and reached out to me with her right hand. "So we are playing handshake now?" I obliged and took her hand. It felt soft and cold. Her expression softened and she closed her eyes. I had no idea what she was up to, but since this seemed like a dream, I was not about to refuse any chance of skin contact with an attractive potential target. Suddenly a distinctive feeling came to me as if I was being asked specifically for permission to know more about me. While this lucid dream was getting weirder by the minute, it was not unpleasant. So I said, "Yes, let's get to know each other better." Immediately after that, the mysterious girl seemed to glow with a soft radiant light. "All right, this is getting too weird," I concluded and tried to let go of her hand, but she held on tight. She opened her eyes, and to my surprise, they now glowed with a faint golden light. Then she spoke for the first time and made the most ridiculous statement I ever heard in my life. "Help me," she said, her voice a whisper, "help me and the others. In exchange, my abilities, my body and my soul are yours." I was like, "Whoa, young lady, we just met, we don't know each other and have yet to even exchange names. Talk about instant escalation." I tried to let go of her hand again but stopped after having another proper look at her face. She was dead serious and seemed so full of sincerity it made me pause. I knew the old saying, never stick it into crazies, even a 12/10 won't be worth the endless troubles ahead, but I felt torn between refusing or accepting to help a pretty stranger. I hesitated again, but by then her golden glowing eyes started to well up. "Hey, this is unfair, I am weak against this type of attack." It was then my logical mind proposed listening to her first. Maybe, just maybe, For once in my unfulfilling life I could be a hero for a fair maiden. After all, this is a dream, right? Sighing, I said. All right, I will do what I can to help. You promise? She asked. I promise. 2 streaks of tears went down her lovely cheeks. Dan, she cried anyway. I am sorry, she said, this is the second time I cried in my life. Well, that was oddly specific but hardly possible. What's your name? I asked, trying to switch the topic. SYRINE. She answered, now beaming with a bewitching smile so bright it seemed to break the fog apart. I must admit, this surreal scene of a radiant pretty young lady smiling and crying at the same time during a heavy fog was mesmerizing. Thank you, SYRINE finally said. Her next words hit me with a wave of foreboding, and farewell. My world exploded, a flash of white light swallowing everything. SYRINE, the fog and the road were no more. Up and down, space and time became irrelevant as I battled the worst case of vertigo I experienced in my life. In the blinding white light, I felt myself moving forward, slowly at first, gaining speed gradually. Without any distinguishable means of locomotion, I was being pulled forward towards something, or someplace. After that my world became nothing but pure blinding white. The world of pure white receded. When my vision finally came back, it was all blurry and took me some time to realize a person was standing in front of me. I could not see properly yet, but it was definitely a female. Was it SYRINE? Darn it, girl, you should have warned me of that. I reached out with my hand, feeling disorientated from the experience. A gloved hand caught my arm to stabilize me, and someone I guessed was the owner of it was saying something, but I couldn't catch any of it. After I gained my footing, my vision and hearing slowly returned. Then I saw it. In front of me was a person wearing a rather faithful replica suit of power armor belonging to the famous Adepta Sororitas, aka Sisters of Battle. My jaw almost dropped as I got a clearer look. The number of details and material quality was leagues beyond any attempt I have seen in photos or real life. A low humming can even be heard coming from the supposed power backpack generator. Really nice details. The wearer of this fine suit was not SYRINE. This new lady here was quite young, probably just over 20. There was this perfect mix of youthfulness and soldiery about her, a perfect candidate for a perfectly faithful replica of what a battle sister should look like in real life. She was a pretty brunette, but a far cry from the previous girl I met. No offense to any ladies who had cosplayed as a sister of battle, but compared to this fine work of art in front of me, all previous renditions would just be crude imitations in comparison. My only critique would be that the color scheme of her suit was too lazy, just dull silver overall with elements of white cloth finished by golden embroidery decoration. I laughed a little and sighed at all this. First an Aquila lady, then a sister of battle cosplayer? Well, at least this lucid dream was consistent in its theme. Expecting to be in a geeky convention setup of sorts, I looked around. We were in a dimly lit large chamber with unconventional futuristic decoration. We were standing on an elevated end of the chamber. I could see a slight slope going down. Nice place, but the lighting was not optimal for a photo session. More battle sisters were seen scattered around the chamber. I counted 10, they were all wearing the same color scheme but had less decorated power armor. The thing that struck me was none of them was laughing, having fun or doing any sort of goofy selfie-taking activities one would typically expect to see in a convention. The brunette sister in front of me, who must be the leader of this bunch, was looking at me with a concerned face. An uneasy feeling whirled up inside me. They all looked far too serious for this to be in a squad cosplay session, and the way they were handling their supposedly prop bolters exuded a type of practice tease that can only be the result of countless hours of drills and training. Something buzzed. The leader-looking sister said a single word. Contact. It was not English nor any other language I knew, but somehow I could understand it. The eerie implication of it almost made my skin crawl. The air tensed up. Everybody either donned their helmets or closed the visor of their helmets. The pretty brunette was the last to put hers on. It was a more decorated variant that had a huge chrome-finished fleur-de-lis symbol on the forehead. I observed up close the reflective sheen on the helmet in the dim light, the complicated light refraction on the helmet's lens pieces, and the weight of it as it slid down to completely cover her head. This is no prop, I realized, and my skin crawled. There was a commotion happening at the far entrance of the chamber. 2 people ran in, but the sisters did not react and let the 2 cross half the chamber hide behind a cover piece. Sounds of footsteps came thundering down from the entrance. From the shadow, a mob erupted into the chamber. I watched in disbelief as a horde of gunmen rushed towards us with their guns blazing, their silhouettes lit up by muzzle flashes. In an instant, the serenity of the chamber was shattered by deafening gunfire. Tracers and last bolts filled the air. My faintest hope that this was all some elaborate prank shattered after I witnessed the shower of plaster and shattering of stonework in the wake of weapons impact. Amongst the cacophony of weapons discharging were some louder, heavier sounds followed by actual explosions that landed far off their mark, but close enough to make me wince and feel their impact. Heavy weapons. The mob had heavy weapons and soon they will have the time to aim. This lucid dream had officially turned into a nightmare. I wanted to scream. There was a gunfight happening right in front of me. This supposed lucid dream session was turning into a real nightmare. Being a lazy pacifist who resided in a relatively peaceful country all my life, I had never been anywhere near a gunfight, let alone a gunfight involving futuristic heavy weapons. But no voice came out from my throat, weird messages kept appearing in my vision. Regardless, action override. Regardless, action override. Regardless, action override. Protect the Holy Daughter. The leader-looking sister ordered and tackled me. The Holy Daughter who? No time for any question, we went down on the floor just as another round of enemy fire was let loose. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. I could see the tracer fire flying past above me and actual bolter rounds flying and spinning in the air. Wait a second. The world around me really did slow down to a crawl. In a mind-numbing state, I began to look around. Everything around me appeared in exquisite detail. It was only then I noticed the new messages that had appeared in my vision. Combat detected. Cogitatio acceleratio auto-activated. Auspex auto-activated. Then the most peculiar thing happened. I felt an expansion of energy burst forth from my body to the surroundings. As the energy expanded forward, scanning everything on its path, I gained a clear understanding of the chaos around me. An indescribable feeling of clarity reached my mind and I could read the whole battle as easily as the back of my hand. We were cornered but benefited from cover and elevation. 11 battle sisters with 3 fighters of unknown origin against 35 enemies, 2 of which were enormous. I froze at the distinctive silhouettes of the 2 giants amongst the hostiles. No mistake about it, mixed within the mass of incoming gunmen and towering amongst them were the familiar shapes of hulking armored individuals with huge pauldrons. This setting, this universe, these can only be the transhuman space marines. As a long-time player myself on the grimdark tabletop miniature game, I personally had over 100 space marines under my collection and instantly recognized these as the main threats. As if the situation wasn't dire enough, one of the hostile marines was holding a weapon that looked too large to be carried by a human, a heavy bolter. The other marine was barking orders. As he did so in slow motion, one of his minions with a flamethrower stepped forward towards 2 of our fighters that were hiding behind a cover. Flamer! I screamed internally at the hapless duo who were about to be doused by fire. Then the time dilation effect stopped. The cacophony of a close-quarter gunfight hit me like a truck. Real-life gunfire was much louder than I had ever imagined. My ears were hurting as I felt the resonance of the discharge of every weapon near me. The sound of firearms being fired indoors had a distinct quality to it. They hit you like a solid hammer. Again I wanted to scream. Again that message appeared. Regardless, action override. I tried to slow down my breathing, only to discover I was breathing at a normal pace. What is this? My mind was a mess but my body was calm. The incongruity made me dizzy. Suddenly, another weird sensation came to me. Mixed within the chaos of the gunfight was a distinct pattern calling. 01010011, 01110001, 01110010, 01010001, 01101110, 01100101. I had absolutely no idea where that came from and why it caught my attention during the gunfight. A shower of shattered stonework pulled me back to the immediate threats near me. A deafening amount of gunfire was pouring from the enemy side, to be answered by distinctively fewer but heavier guns from around me. Bolters, the sisters were shooting bolters. One can clearly hear the gun caliber difference by the sound they made. Regardless, lucid dream or not, I need to get away from here. Then an inconvenient truth came to me. I realized that except for a large blast door a short distance behind us, the hostiles had blocked the only way in and out of this chamber. I knew this from the scanning action earlier. Every inch of the chamber was pictured clearly in my head. I could see and rotate it in my mind's eye with absolute clarity. But was this information true? Can I try to do the scanning action again to confirm? I need to see it again, to confirm if there was really no other place to run. What was it called again? Auspex was it? Come on, come on. My consciousness expanded in the next second. Auspex activated. Another blast of scanning energy expanded forward. With my readings, I saw the battle from a god's eye view. The duo that was approached by the enemy flamer had relocated further back. The piece of cover they were hiding behind just a moment ago was in flames. I wondered if they had heard my warning. The enemy flamer had garnered himself a lot of attention. Soon he was fed with a dozen bolt rounds and exploded into a huge fireball. The blinding flash and explosion robbed me of my hearing. Nothing but constant ringing in my ears. But I could still see the enemies from the residual readings from my last scan. Banking on the new experience, I tried to do the same action as before. Hostile, 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 hostile with a grenade launcher. I marked out the closest batch of enemies and tried to project their positions to the people on my side. To my amazement, the Battle Sisters switched from random suppression to disciplined bursts, zeroing in on the targets I marked in the smoke-filled chamber. The first enemy to go down was the grenade launcher user. He was standing around, apparently still dazed by the fireball. A bolt round lodged into his head and blew it off like a watermelon hit by a speeding truck. The rest of his marked companions soon followed his fate. The unfortunate gunmen briefly danced like ragdolls as they were hit by a hail of bolt rounds, then they literally exploded, showering blood and body parts freely before fading from my readings. I wanted to vomit. The air had a hint of metallic taste added to it now. Deprived of sight and sound, I became conscious of the stank of blood and sweat. 01010011, 01110001, 01110010, 01010001, 01101110, 01100101. That calling came again, but I was too occupied with making myself small behind cover. Despite the good opening for the fight, we were still outnumbered and pinned down by the sheer volume of incoming hostile fire. Fortunately, high ground and solid cover proved to be our salvation as the enemies struggled to utilize their advantage to end us. With teary eyes, I risked a quick peek and saw them advancing through their fallen ranks, the Space Marines pushing the rest forward through the smoke and dust. This was bad, very bad. I need to do the scanning trick again. Auspex activated. For the third time, I sent forth an expanding detection net to mark the enemies. Hostile, 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 another hostile with a grenade launcher that was sending grenades over at my current location. Grenades were flying over here. At the same time, a corner of my mind registered the hostile Space Marine aiming his heavy bolter at me. My mind went blank. Get down. The leading sister appeared from nowhere and pushed me down, covering me with herself from impending death. Totally helpless, I closed my eyes and waited for impact. After being subjected to the loudest sound I have heard in my life, I expected the worst and opened my eyes only to see dust all around. Miraculously, all my limbs seemed to be still in their respective places in contrast to the piece of life-saving cover that had been blown clear by heavy fire. The sister who saved my life was still on top of me but appeared hurt and was groaning from unseen injuries. How I escaped from that unscathed but the power-armored sister didn't was beyond me. The gunfight raged on all around. It appeared the heavy bolter Marine was directing his wrath elsewhere at the moment after being shot by other sisters. We have to move, now, I thought and pushed the sister. She fell over with surprising ease, considering she was wearing power armor and the full weight it entailed. Then I saw it. My hands, these weren't my hands. I panicked and looked down at myself for the first time in a while due to all the happenings. Instead of my usual t-shirt, I saw a white robe. What in the world? A loud clang was heard behind me. I turned and saw that the sealed blast door was opened. Grotesque figures were pouring out, tracked monstrosities with human-looking torsos rolled out one after another with huge guns blazing from where their arms were supposed to be. At the forefront of the newcomers was a ginormous figure, far larger even than the Space Marines below, and it was rushing towards me, non-human legs carrying it across the floor with astonishing speed. It opened and stretched its many arms. I saw a multitude of weapons and guns hanging on some of it. So this is GG. I expected death or the end of a dream and closed my eyes. But neither came, so I looked up. A huge hooded figure was in front of me. It had positioned itself to block any incoming fire from the hostile gunman below, its many hands extended to form a shield around me. The palms of all the hands were metallic but shaped into distinct human-like appendages. 01010011, 01110001, 01110010, 01010001, 01101110, 01100101. Finally, its meaning reached me. The binary canticle faded and a name appeared in my mind. SYRINE. The hooded figure was directly addressing me. Where its eyes would be were several huge lenses. On all their reflections I could see but a single person, the Aquila young lady I met at the long winding foggy road.